Well, first it was Cape Town and now Nelson Mandela Bay. Which part of the country is going to face day zero next? It's not a case of if, it's a case of when. But what exactly is the problem? Let's get some answers now from Desigan Naidu from the Presidential Climate Commission. Desigan, good to have you on eNCA. So what is the Presidential Climate Commission doing at the moment? We've got pending day zero down in Nelson Mandela Bay, and we've got a water scarcity focus here on eNCA. How worried are you and the Commission?
Good morning, everyone. We're very worried, but this is a phenomenon that's a long time coming, and we have been living in and out of drought episodes for a very long time indeed. I mean, we've had one of the most severe droughts in the last century quite recently, and this is an overhang of that. The key issues that we're engaging, and the president, in the way he responded to the KwaZulu-Natal floods, was quite explicit. And he said, look, you've got to deal with the disaster where it is. And you've got to make sure, for example, in Nelson Mandela Bay, that you manage to get reasonable water into the system so that people can survive, like we did in Cape Town and elsewhere in the country during the last drought. But in the way we do it, we have to respond to the real phenomenon that we're dealing with, and that's climate change, which means we have to make our systems resilient and climate smart, because if we don't, we're going to have this over and over and over again.
Yeah, it's a big issue, isn't it? And I suppose the issue comes in as well whenever we talk about climate change. I always get the sense that some people's eyes gloss over. It seems like, well, that's going to be a problem for 40, 50, 60, 70 years from now. Why do we just not take it that seriously when we have very good examples, practical examples that have happened just recently? We don't seem to really get the urgency the same way we do with not having electricity.
Well, I think it's something we have to talk about a lot more. And what the media is doing, what you are doing, is really, really good to get that consciousness happening. But just to put this in perspective, people talk about the 1.5 degree increase as a 2050 target. Now, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change and its scientists, which is a very large body of scientists around the world, about 40,000 of them, do this analysis. And what came out of that analysis in what's called the sixth assessment report is that we already have a huge concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere already. In fact, we're already at 1.1 degrees of that 1.5 degrees. So 1.5 degrees is not 2050, it's around the corner. Secondly, and this is really important, is that there's no stepwise change in the system. That as soon as you have an incremental increase in this warming effect, or what now a lot of people are calling the global heating effect, immediately you have a response inside the system. So it doesn't wait for these stepwise changes to happen, and it's happening all over the world. So when we had our floods in KZN, at the same time, there were floods in Thailand, in Philippines, and Australia. And as we sit now, there are new restrictions in Paris around outdoor events because it's too hot already in their summer. So it's a phenomenon that we are living on a day-to-day basis. Perhaps the difference between Eskom and water is the water sector always makes a plan to make sure that people have water, because you can't do without it at all. So we really have to up the consciousness and the responses, and very importantly, the investments that we need.
And that's where I was going to go to next. You led me there very nicely, Desigan. Let's talk about the investments into avoiding and adapting to climate change. So I'll give you the title again, Climate Commission Adaptation. What are we adapting to? What's the plan here? What's the timeline to mitigate the effects of climate change?
Look, the first thing that we have to do is to reorganize and rechannel our current intended investments in infrastructure to climate resilient infrastructure, because it is quite different. And it's not just a tweak here and a tweak there, they're fundamental changes in the system. And what we have to do very robustly is to have a massaging effect in a way that maintains the resource base, because we can't have radical new infrastructure that nobody pays for. So one of the things that we are doing is engaging the Minister of Water and his Director General around something called a Water Partnerships Office, which runs through the DBSA, around climate smart infrastructure. And there's a good movement globally around this as more and more financial institutions are saying in the energy domain, we're no longer funding new projects in brown energy. We're only going to fund new projects in green energy. And we're trying to effect the same kind of change in the water domain so that we have water resilient infrastructure. But let me tell you what that actually is. So water resilient infrastructure is a combination of the physical infrastructure system that you build, but also the methods with which you do things. So one of the things that we have to deal with, which is beyond climate change, is we've got to make sure that our pipes don't leak. I mean, in Nelson Mandela Bay, the unaccounted for water is over 40%, which means whatever little water goes into that pipe, 40% of that is not making it to the end consumer. We have to fix that. But over and above that, it's also about the ecological infrastructure. So is the ecology resilient enough to maintain the kind of water security that we need inside the system? The short answer is it's not. We have to invest in that. Yeah. And in the way we deal with wastewater, we have to mitigate further impacts on climate change, including possibly using the water energy nexus to actually use the water system to provide much of the energy that we badly need for our energy security.
It's almost a case of closing the loop, isn't it? It's a case of don't try and rebuild new infrastructure all the time. Use what we've got and do it smartly. It's almost like closing the loop down, isn't it? It's fascinating. Desigan, thank you so much. I appreciate your time. I'm sure we'll speak again. Desigan Naidu from the Presidential Climate Commission Adaptation Lead. So there are plans. I just got to wonder if it's not just too late, but at least it looks like we're moving in a step forward motion, which I suppose is at least one positive way of looking at this.